What's going on, everybody? Welcome to season 2, episode 1 of the Lone Guitarist podcast. I am Ben Tint here, and we are going to kick things off a little bit differently. Usually, I interview one sort of like really high profile, like an Eric Clapton or a BB King, or like a Segovia style person. This time, I'm going to interview a bunch of underlings like myself. So it's just a bunch of, actually, these people are really cool people. They are part of the guitar family. I went to school with all of them at one point or another. And instead of doing kind of the typical interview that I do, I thought we would have a little bit of fun just by asking questions, some questions that some of the viewers have submitted, and we're going to have a discussion about them. So I have my super fancy note card right here. And just think of it as like your favorite game show, but there's 5 people that you don't really know too well or don't really want to watch at all. But before we do all of that, I'm going to introduce today's cast. Again, these are incredible musicians in their own right, and we are going to hear from them. So I'm just going to go alphabetical order. Alex, how are you today?
I'm good, Ben. How are you holding up?
All right. I'm glad that I'm here.
I'm glad to talk to you.
Alex, why don't you tell everybody what you do?
Yeah, so I'm originally from Des Moines, Iowa, and I moved out here in 2015. And I started my master's studies at the Hart School in 2016 and finished in 2019 in guitar performance. And currently, I'm just teaching all over the state in Connecticut. We recently, Guitar Squad just had our first performance. Was that, a week and a half ago now?
Yeah.
Right? So that was my first time playing live since February, which was really nice because obviously since the shutdown happened, it's been pretty tough finding live performances. So yeah, at the moment, I'm just kind of looking forward to more of that and teaching as much as I can.
Awesome. Next on my alphabetical list that now just changed is Jaclyn Jones. Hi, Jackie.
Hey, how's it going, Ben?
I am fantastic. Why don't you tell everybody how you're doing and what you do?
Well, I'm doing pretty well. Right now, I'm currently baking a Christmas pie, so you might see me shuffling around in the background. But I'm from New Jersey originally, and I got my bachelor's and master's at the Hart School, classical guitar performance, and I'm a happy performer and teacher nowadays. So the Guitar Squad had our first show. That was great. We all got together, played music, and we can't wait for the next show. And then what's new with me is I have a Luca Duo show coming up January 17th with the Connecticut Guitar Society. So if you're looking for some cool music, that's a fun show that I'm doing coming up. So keeping busy.
Awesome. Is that a harp in the background?
Yeah. So that harp, it's like a miniature harp. Yeah, just got it off of TJ Maxx. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
So that harp, my husband Josh, you guys know him, but just for those listeners who don't know,
Yeah.
his grandfather built it, and he was really into Welsh stuff and Welsh music and his heritage. So then he played a lot of Welsh tunes on that thing.
Wow.
If you guys stick around till the end of the episode, maybe you can hear me play some of it.
That's really cool. That is really cool. We have someone joining the meeting later than me, which is great. John, welcome to the meeting. We're
Hey.
recording.
Cool.
So I mean, I know I was late, but I'm messing with you. John, we're going through the kind of the roster of who we have right now. We just heard from Jackie. I'm going to hear from Morgan next, and then we're so happy that you could join in. Morgan, how are you?
I'm doing okay. So yeah, my name is Morgan. I went to school with a lot of these guys. I also teach around Connecticut. Currently, I'm preparing for a music camp I'm going to do next week, like a winter music camp, and I also play a lot of musicals when those will eventually be a thing again. So hopefully soon. But
That's awesome. And Morgan and I just found out that we share a student in common. One of the students that he
Yeah.
teaches, I teach at my school, so that's kind of cool.
Great.
Sarah, how are you today?
I'm doing all right. How are you?
I am extravagant. Why don't you tell the world what you do?
Sure. I also met everyone at Heart. I grew up in Aleppo, Syria. And I recently received my bachelor's from Heart, and I'm currently taking a gap year before going abroad to Belgium to do my master's. So I'm at an interesting point right now with this year because of COVID and everything. So I do have a couple students. But yeah, I guess in a way it almost feels like my career is a little bit put on hold with everything. So I actually have a part-time job as a paralegal assistant. So it's a completely different world. But yeah, I've been really busy though, like practicing, preparing a new program and getting ready, to go abroad for my master's.
By the way, you are preparing to study with the great Antigone Goni, so it's not like you're.
Yes,
I just want
it's a lot of
I
pressure.
just want people to know when you're like, I'm going to Brussels, and they're like, oh, is that like that? Is what weird
That
European
vegetable?
teacher? Yeah, like who teaches out there? You're going to study with somebody who is like been at the top of their game for a very long time. I also want to say how cool it is that we're all kind of doing our own thing. Like Morgan is like in the middle of work right now, and he's like just chilling on an iPad. I love that we're like, usually when I do these interviews, people are like, we're hanging out, we're like looking right into the camera. It kind of sounds like I just like gave Morgan a backhanded compliment, but I'm not. I'm really happy that he's here, and whatever he's doing on his iPad, I'm sure is really important.
I won't get my iPad now.
I'm just playing around. I'm playing. And then we saved the best for last. John, how are you?
Hey Ben, I'm doing pretty well. I'm just hanging out here. I just did a listen about maybe like half an hour ago or so. So I'm just hanging out. Gonna eat some dinner once we get off of this, or once I get off of this, if you guys stay longer than I do. But yeah, that's what I am doing.
Why don't you tell everybody a little bit of like what your story is, what you do for a living?
So I guess what I do probably very similar to what all these guys do. I mostly teach. In the past 2 years, I've gotten really big into the Suzuki method, so I'm trying to primarily make my studio that and build Suzuki students. And I'm constantly trying to find ways to learn more, whether it's taking one-off trainings with different teachers in the area or now online because of the whole COVID thing. One of the pluses is that I've been able to take online classes, teachers all over the world, well, all over the US at least, that I would normally not be able to afford to just go to spend like 2 days with them, watch their students and talk to them about what they're doing. But because of COVID, they've been able to do these virtual sessions where we get to go in with different teachers, watch their students, talk about what they're playing, and then also get feedback on a select topic that teacher feels like they specialize in. So that's actually been a plus of COVID. I mean, I've been able to learn some things that I normally wouldn't be able to. So that's primarily what I do for a living, I guess, is teach, and every now and then I do online performance type things. I guess recently one of the jobs I have, which is maybe an interesting thing, has this program going on called Somebody Played For Me. And what it is they will pair a musician up with different clients at different hospitals. And pretty much you'll go into the room obviously over Zoom, or they use this video chatting program very similar to Zoom. And you'll pretty much just talk to them and announce to them, hey, my name's so-and-so, I go into school here, or I do this for a living. I'm going to be playing blank, and then you either give them either a virtual concert, but what's been my experience is actually more like a hangout where like I'll play a piece and they'll ask a bunch of questions about the music, about myself, about guitar, and then we'll talk for like 10 minutes or so. And then like, okay, cool, want to hear another piece? And they're like, yeah, sure. And then we'll do the same thing. So playing 3 or 4 pieces ends up being like an hour hangout, just like playing a piece. Hey, let's talk about it for a bit. Every now and then they'll share their experiences with music. Some of them like, oh, I used to play like piano when I was younger. And I've been finding a really fun way and a cool way to actually bring classical guitar to people that normally don't get to see classical guitar, actually have no idea what it is. I'll usually start each session being like, hey, so I'm playing guitar. Now, when people think of guitar, they think of rock and roll. They think of singer-songwriters like Bob Dylan. But today, it's going to be a little bit different. I'm going to be playing classical guitar. And then I'll be like, well, a lot of people think classical guitar means this. But really, it can also mean this, and kind of showing them what it could be. So I try to pick pieces that I think show that, such as pieces by Andrew York or pieces by Augustine Berrios, things of that like. So that's been a lot of fun. I've been having fun doing that every few weeks. And it's been nice getting to sort of perform despite the situation that we are currently in.
Right. Cool. Well, thank you all very much for sort of telling us what you all kind of do. Let me just hit one thing. A couple of you had mentioned Guitar Squad, and because I didn't say it in the introduction, Guitar Squad is, of course, something that you guys will see if you're watching this video. I'll give you some information linked up below. But the idea of Guitar Squad is that this is sort of a group of us like-minded people, and more so friends, who just sort of came together and said, let's bring guitar to the masses. Let's make this stuff a little less intimidating intellectually for the average person on the street, to enjoy. So our conversation tonight might overlap a little bit of that, but it's not just to serve Guitar Squad. So thank you all very much. I think we should get started. I have 5 questions here on my official note card. This is super official cardstock. And I wrote the answers in pen. Okay, question number 1. So I'm going to ask a question and then let's talk about it. I want to hear what you guys have to think. I really worked hard on these questions. The last one I think you guys are going to enjoy. So let's just start off with something really simple in concept, but probably very difficult to answer. So you're welcome. Question number 1, what is the best and worst thing about classical guitar?
Boy. Well, I guess off the top of my head, the best thing about it that I've found is how incredibly supportive the community is compared to, I think, a lot of instruments, especially in academia. And especially when you travel around and you go to guitar festivals and competitions and stuff, even, competitions, I use air quotes. It's not overly competitive, and it's never vindictive or hostile. It's really a pretty loving group of people, and a pretty open-minded group of people, and everybody's just looking to learn from one another. I guess that would be my favorite thing about it off the bat, is just the community, like you all.
I've always felt like the community was really like, that was something that we kind of developed because we were always these sort of outsiders compared to the rest of the conservatory. I mean, one thing that I heard in grad school, and I'm sure you guys had heard it too, as guitarists, sometimes we don't start till a little bit later in life learning the classical and like the European tradition of understanding and analyzing music. So because of that, and I'm sure Chris said this to you, he'd say to me all the time, he'd be like, the flute player's been playing since 3rd grade. You picked this up at, as a teenager. So I feel like that was always something that contributed to why it's almost like we needed each other. Does anybody else have a thought about their the best or worst thing about classical guitar?
Well, I can talk about it from a playing perspective and a performer perspective, because I think that all the music is great. There's really no bad things about classical guitar itself and the music, but from the performer, I'd say the best thing about it is that it's really hard. The worst thing about it is that it's really hard. I love the challenge about it. I love the fact that I learn something in my music every day, even though I've been practicing it for years, and it's just a constant exploration. But at the same time, there's a lot of growth that needs to happen, a lot of dedication, and a lot of practice time with just technique. Most people don't really put on their Spotify playlist and play a C major scale for 20 minutes and just listen to that. But us as musicians, we will endure kind of psychotic things like that in order to get better. So
but it doesn't like seem,
it can be hard too.
It doesn't seem psychotic to us, right? Because like we're doing it, and like if you have a good practice day, you enjoy that C major scale. And it doesn't seem like, I mean, there's definitely days, don't get me wrong, where I'm like, this feels like, what does Scott Tennant say? It seems like some sort of cruel and inhumane torture. to go from C to G7 back and forth. But like when you get that thing, for us at least, of like, oh, let me pay attention to where I'm preparing, or oh, hey, I'm getting a sound I wasn't getting before, or that feels better on my nail or something. Like, it's weird. Like, we enjoy that kind of torture, right?
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, like because each time that you play that, it's different for us, even though it might sound the same to someone who's really might not be listening as intensely as the performer. But yeah, I do find that a lot of fun.
Right.
But it does take a lot of focus too, and just like lots of practice on that in order to get what you want. So I think it's fun, but a lot of people find that challenging too.
One of the things that I don't know if I wanted to ask this question because I wanted to see what my friends thought about such a provocative question. But I mean, I don't know, is there a worse thing about classical guitar? I feel like sometimes not guilty, but I feel bad about the amount of time I spend on one piece where I'm like, I really want to play everything, right? But you can't play everything. And then you have to decide, do I want to play a lot of things okay, or do I want to play a few things really well? And so I've always felt like I've always been really jealous of those players. I guess they're usually like superstars, but the players that seem to like burn through rep and it's all really good. And like they release albums of like, lute suites or whatever. And it's like, I want to be able to understand rep that quickly and that effectively, so I can play as much of it as possible. So no one wants to talk crap about guitar. Okay.
Well, I mean,
good.
I will
It's
play
all
second
good.
if
It's
you'd
all
like
good.
to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's go.
Go ahead,
That's why I
Sarah.
asked it.
I mean, well, I guess first to start out with the positive though, I would say I think classical guitar is just such a great instrument, and especially as a solo instrument, because I feel like something like a violin in an orchestra, amazing. String quartet, amazing. But like solo, it sounds missing without piano accompaniment, right? But for me personally, at least, everyone's different. I find guitar and piano to be like the only two instruments that really just speak so much from a listener's perspective, especially for them being polyphonic instrument. You're hearing a lot of different voices and interactions going on. And I think kind of adds on to what Jackie was saying about it being a challenge, because you're doing so many different things at the same time. And every time you feel like you got one thing right, then you look at like the entire list of things still need to be done. But it's fun. It's like a constant like push for improvement. Yeah, so it's a lot of fun. And I guess like the one thing for me in terms of a downside is just nails. Honestly,
That's what I was gonna say. Yep.
Trying to get like the right shape to get the best sound, and then sometimes like even if you do file them in a way where you feel like you're getting a good sound, all it takes is just like a wrong pass from a basketball or something, and like there goes the nail, and then like you start at ground zero. So I feel like it's just like this obsession that every guitarist that I know has.
Well, your problem is that you're playing sports. I mean, the whole point
basketball I haven't played in like 4 years, but that was just like the first thing that came to mind, because that was just like a classic. Oh, there goes my nail.
Before, I know Alex has something he wants to say, but before you were talking about guitar and piano being very similar, and your future teacher, were you there for the master class she did with Morgan when he did the Black Decameron? That was before Sarah's time.
That was the year before I was at Hart.
Antigone said, she said, you can look at the guitar as a mini piano, and it is in some ways, but if that's the only way that you look at it, it's flawed. And I forget what she said after that, but I think we can all kind of agree, like when you're talking about solo violin playing, yeah, like to our ears, like take the first violin sonata and they have to roll each chord, right? And like obviously who are we to judge, but at the same time we're like, no, like it should have a full chord in there and be able to express that chord any way you want. And that's one of the things that I agree with you on, about that. And especially something like Bach, where you're like, yeah, I'm kind of playing a keyboard like instrument. I just sort of operate it in a different way.
Yeah.
Alex, you were gonna jump in.
Yeah, I mean, I was just gonna piggyback exactly off of what was Sarah saying, as far as like having to maintain these all the time really limits you, especially if you're interested like in athletics. Like Sarah was saying, like I would love to go take a jujitsu class right now. It's kind of tough when you have long fingernails. Or like I slackline really avidly. It's one of my favorite hobbies. I would love to rock climb. That's one of those things that they kind of go hand in hand. But again, rock climbing just does not pair well with having long fingernails. And it's really...
I'm sorry. I was gonna say I've gotten away with having long nails in jujitsu. You gotta learn. You know how when you're right hand, you kind of learn to do things differently with your right hand.
Mm-hmm.
Like your left hand is sort of like a child in the wild, like just grabbing things. But your right hand, you're always like you're like Chris Elliott from Scary Movie 2, where he's like, take my strong hand. You know?
Wait, Ben, I had no idea you did jiu-jitsu before.
I did it for a couple months and right before the shutdown, and I haven't gone back, and I've been waiting to go back. I message with the instructors all the time. I'm watching videos. I'm trying to practice on my wife. She doesn't like it. But you can get away with it, because they've said to me a couple times, oh, you got to trim your fingernails. And I've been like, nah, dude, just be cool. Just be cool. I haven't scratched anybody. I have broken a nail, but I haven't scratched anybody.
Okay. Well, that's good to know.
You just gotta, you just learn how to move your hand and tuck it. But the thumbnail for everybody is scary.
Yeah.
But I hear what you're saying. It's like, yeah, it's like maintaining, but also there's a sense of ownership in there, right? Like you're like, I don't need any picks. My body is the instrument, which is kind of something that as non-vocalists, I think we struggle to want. I remember a good friend of mine was a saxophone player a long time ago. Said to me, I had just started music school, and I was practicing breathing while I was playing, breathing before phrases. And he made a joke, and it wasn't. He didn't mean it to have like any sort of bad intent, but he said something like, "Oh, you're copying wind players, is what you're doing." And that stuck with me, right? Like, I'm like, why are we copying? Obviously, you could talk about all the reasons that we do something like that, but ultimately, I was like, yeah, I'm trying to get closer to my instrument by doing something. I necessarily have to actually breathe? No, but it's something that we do to try to make the instrument closer to our bodies, right?
Yeah, definitely.
So
I'm so glad you brought up breathing, because I feel like that is an issue that is talked about in music school, and people just widely accept, like, once you are in the professional realm, you don't actually talk about breathing techniques. But that's something I have to do with my students all the time and remind myself. But yeah, at first you think, okay, I'll breathe like a wind player, and then you like breathe right after you arrive on the phrase. But after playing personally, I just found that breathing almost as a pickup into the phrase, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1.
right.
That just felt more natural to me. And as I was playing too, that helped me really clarify the phrasing. So if we have that ability to breathe like that, and it is organic, why not?
I mean, singers don't have a choice. If it's somebody like somebody on Broadway or an opera singer or Billy Joel, I mean, if Billy Joel breathes in the wrong place, it's going to sound stupid, right? So it's like, if, breathing comes so naturally to all these other instruments, why not us? And we have to breathe anyway, so why not just sort of reap the benefits of what they provide for us? I'm going to quote Oscar Giglia, and if I quote him one more time, I think I have to start paying royalties. But he says in an interview with, I think it's Simon Powis from Yale, he says, and he's talking about breathing, and Oscar he tells these really long stories, and he's like, and another thing breathing does, it puts oxygen in your fingertips. And I tried that when I was studying that last scale run at the Black Decameron, the first movement. and obviously you breathe there anyway, but I was like, yeah. And then you start thinking about it. It is sending oxygen to your fingertips, and sometimes you can use that energy to do something that's a little more difficult. I think we've talked about some really good best and worst things about classical guitar. I am going to move on to question number 2. This is sort of relating to teaching, and maybe this will reflect your own journey, but I'm really directing this toward you as teachers and your students. What are some of the worst practice habits that your students have? Maybe you've had them before, probably, because that's how they usually get them, is because we had them. But what are some of the worst practice habits that you see in your students? Yeah.
So if it's okay, I actually want to answer first. So I'm gonna take a quick pause after this and head eat and go eat, and then I'll come back later if there's time. If that's all right with Ben. If not, I'll leave now and won't come back. But
wait, what did you say you're gonna eat? What are you gonna eat?
Yeah, I gotta eat some food and then I'll
What
come
are you
back.
gonna eat though?
I'm having some chicken and soup. I'm having some soup and chicken, but not chicken noodle soup. I'm having some soup and then I'm having some chicken after the
How
soup.
is the chicken prepared?
But it is oven roasted fried with cornmeal and breadcrumbs.
Nice.
Sorry, I didn't think about that. I didn't make it, so I had to think about how it was made.
You know I live a couple miles from you guys, right?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
But I guess to quickly answer your question, I think the biggest thing I've seen, and I feel like I'm going over it with people constantly, is understanding the difference between practicing and playing. Like, so they'll be like, oh, I practiced for like 20 minutes today. And then like, what'd you do? And they'll be like, oh, I played through every song twice. And I'm like, well, what were you aiming to get done in those 20 minutes? He's like, I was like, I don't know, I want to play each song twice. And that might be like, obviously that could be a goal if they're doing that. But overall, I've been noticing it's a lot of like, not focused practicing, right? And I think that's the biggest thing I've seen in a weakness in almost all my students. And I've been helping them kind of the same way that we did have with Chris or with Dick's book, The Art and Technique of Practicing, is setting goals, having a goal-oriented practice schedule, right? Deciding what you want to get done in that chunk of time, how much that chunk of time is, instead of thinking of, I'm going to practice today for this long, I'm going to practice today and get this thing done, or I'm going to practice this week, and for next lesson, I'm going to show up and have this thing done. And I've been noticing, at least with my students, that once that is really concrete and they have an idea of what that means, that I notice a lot more results. And as a teacher, I can feel a lot more confident assigning them things, knowing that they're going to come back the following week ready to do that. So that's what I would say. Definitely.
Is that something though, John, that teachers know to teach?
I would say no. I mean, I think one big thing, I mean, as me and Sarah kind of found out in one when we did that one video together about reviewing someone trying to explain how to teach classical guitar, is that really no. I mean, I definitely got some feedback and input from other guitarists about that as well. It's like we're very lucky. I mean, us six, anyone else who went to Hart and actually had a class on teaching pedagogy, and I even talked to other friends who went to study at what school is it, at one of the schools in New York, SUNY Purchase, I want to say, with Jaclyn Jones. They went to study at the one that's in Long Island, or they went to study at all these different schools. And I asked them like, what course are they taking in their master's program or in their undergrad, and if they're taking like lute tab or guitar literature. And they're like, no, we just have lessons, chamber ensemble, and like a studio class kind of thing. And they're going out into the world. I'm not saying that these guys aren't good teachers, but they're not having someone who is a good teacher explain to them what to look for in students, even if they're experiencing them themselves. So I think no. I would say most teachers don't know this unless they take the effort to go out and buy a book on guitar pedagogy, for example, or they go out to study, like, for example, even taking a course on Suzuki Book 1 can help you out in your teaching, even if you don't plan to teach Suzuki. I think it's a path of some kind that you can take and focus on. So to answer your question, no, I think we're lucky that we have Chris and Dick, and even in studio class, how they did a thing when me and Alex were first starting, how they had a thing where they would give like the doctorate students coaching on how they taught us. And even though that might not have worked out the best for our own, me and Alex's like own learning, in a way, depending on who the teacher was, it was actually really cool to see someone like Dick or Chris Provost or Chris Ladd really go into new teachers out into the world and be like, well, no, that's not how you explain that. The student is not going to understand it that way. Or they're having this issue. You can't try to solve the issue with this solution. It's not going to work. So I think no. I think we're very fortunate we got those experiences.
And I think so too. But I also think that extends out to just the general guitar music store teaching, guitar teaching public, right? I taught at music and arts for a total of 10 years.
Mhm.
I taught in that building for 7 years as it was in music and arts, and 3 years before when it was LaSalle Music. And I remember once I came to this understanding, and it was part on my own and part from the influence of my teachers at the conservatory, and actually before that at state school, just the music department. And I was thinking, without this goal oriented before that experience, I was thinking, without this goal oriented mindset and teaching the kids to practice, I was thinking, what the hell, what was I teaching them? Because like, I would always teach out of Hal Leonard book one, and I don't regret that decision, but I remember just getting to the same point with a lot of students where I'd be like, why can't you do this? And I wouldn't always say that to them, because I knew it was probably something that I was doing, or it's probably something that I wasn't making clear. But it took a long time for me to be able to say, no, you don't get to move on to the open B string until you can do the G and the A as the quarter notes that they are, right? And even that is an example of goal setting, right? Saying that your goal is to be able to play these two notes the way they are, not just fudge through them. So I have to agree with you.
Yeah, I think kind of off of that before I head out, I think the other thing is too making sure that their understanding of the standards are clear. I mean, I think I have students that I'll make it clear, like kind of you said, like you have to be able to do this before you can move on. And once they get that, they'll be in the process of moving on. But tons of times I've taken over for other teachers or I've subbed places and they're working out of Hal Leonard book one, for example, and the student can't tell me what an eighth note is or how to count it. And I'm like, well, as a teacher, is it right for me to be like, it would feel wrong for me to be like, oh, that sounds great, awesome. That's what your teacher does. Great, let's move on. Good job. But also, it's not my job as a sub, let's say, to be like, hey, your teacher's wrong. You need to go back to page one and learn all this stuff again. You know what I mean? So it's like it puts me in a weird situation as well as the teacher. So I think making sure that I guess in practice that they know what their standards are. Like they know, like I need to count this. I need to be able to say the letter names. I need to acknowledge that this note is this and this thing means that. That makes a huge difference if that's ingrained to them from day one, because then they'll hopefully, as long as they keep up that same path, they'll just always do that thing.
Right.
But if they don't, then they're going to face tons of problems down the road. Because I definitely did myself, where I was like, oh, this sounds good, great, and then I'm sure as many of you guys know, we think we're doing great, and then some teacher comes along that finally says, you can't move on until you work on how to prepare better, or you can't move on until you work on getting rid of that extra tension in your finger. And it's like, well, I wish I knew that before because I would have been doing that the whole time.
Right.
Yeah. So Ben, would you prefer me to leave and come back in, or would you prefer me to just mute and turn my camera off?
I think you should, first of all, let's take a poll.
Okay.
I don't know what John should know. I think you should mute and turn your camera off, and you should come back after dinner. I think you should enjoy that chicken and the soup.
I will. I'll definitely do
And
that.
I think you should be back for question number 5 because it's really. I'll just give you a preview. It's something that has blown up our chat in the very recent history.
All right. Well, I'll be back soon. Seeing we're only on question 2 and it's already almost 9 o'clock, I think I'll be fine. So I'll see you guys soon. All right. Thanks.
Okay. Question number 3. This comes from a veteran of our podcast and a good friend of mine. His name is Mike Day, and he wants to know if any of you sort of how you handle your music related taxes, right? And and more specifically, do you ever go to sort of a financial guide or an accountant to make sure that you're able to get all the proper benefits and deductions of a musician as well as an independent contractor? Because I know when you are self-employed and you're an independent contractor, there are many different rules. And I'm not the one to ask about that, so I'm asking y'all.
I've been using TurboTax, but I honestly don't know if that's the best method. It's not like I mean, that's a great question because that hasn't been taking up our chats as of late. Like, so what kind of return did you all get compared to your income? We're all just like, are we actually going to be in the green or the red, you know, as private contractors? I know other people I've talked to, like Chris Ladd, have advised to go see specific accountants who've worked with musicians or self-contractors. I mean, it couldn't hurt. It's probably around the same price. So if you're asking and in doubt, you know, yeah, keep putting out the feelers for other musicians for specific accountants, I'd say. But I don't have anyone particularly in mind. It's not a bad idea, Mike.
Shout out to TurboTax. Shout out to TurboTax. They sponsored this episode. What always sponsors the Blue Apron and Squarespace, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Wix.com.
Yeah.
There's another.
Can we accept both?
Yeah. I did my taxes as an independent contractor, and I just messed them up every time. I feel like I never kept receipts. I feel like the weight and the responsibility of having to file the way that is designed, and it probably helps out a lot of people, is not a responsibility that a person like me should undertake. That's like, you know, yeah, like I can barely remember to pack my lunch for the morning. If you're telling me to plan a year in advance for something financial related, I mean, God, I probably spent more money on strings than I have for, you know, food in the past 10 years, and I don't know where half of those receipts are. So I'm not the one to ask. Sorry, Mike Day, we didn't get to the root of your
So just real quick about that, Ben, you know, if you're ordering them online, you have all those receipts just right there in your account.
That's what I was gonna say.
So like literally I just go in there and I print out like my year history, and then that's it.
Yeah. I actually do have a tax guy, and what I do is I go through, because I pretty much get everything through my checking account or my debit account. So I go through literally when I've got to send him all my tax information, and I look at everything that I've used as like a business thing, like strings or books for students or anything like that. And then usually he'll email me back after I've sent him this full list. And usually the things he wants to know is like, if I buy a new instrument, what proportion of business use to personal use is it? If I am driving, like what proportion is business to personal use? And then I've also got to check my Venmo history too. Because usually if I get a sub for like a show, or if I get a sub for teaching, I Venmo them, and I can write that off as well. But yeah, I usually just send him all the information. And then if he has any more questions for me, he usually just, you know, asks me back. But usually it's stuff like, hey, you bought this banjo, for example, like what proportion of that was used for shows and what proportion is just you playing it for fun? And
how do you figure out something like that?
I mean, for the banjos, I don't really play them for fun. I use them for like if I'm playing a musical that needs a banjo. If it's something like it's a little bit harder, like last year I bought my Ernie Ball Music Man, and I do play that for fun.
Yeah.
So I do play that for fun, and I just have to estimate. So I'll give him my best guess of like, let's say 30% of the time, I don't know, I'm practicing for a show, and 70% of the time I'm just using it for myself. Then he'll factor that in for the write-off.
Would you say, Morgan, since you have a guy, would you say that the price that you have to pay for that kind of service benefits you in the long run? Like, are you paying for things that you probably couldn't do yourself, and therefore end up getting more money, or saving less time, or getting more time?
So, I mean, honestly, I'm just like a privileged little boy because I get it from my parents. They do my tax, or they do taxes through.
Wait, is your tax guy your dad?
No.
No. I thought you were like, I have a tax guy, and then you're like, Dad.
No.
Hey,
So
I wouldn't blame you. My dad's an actuary, and all the time I'm just like, hey, can you calculate this huge number and this huge number? And he's like, got you. I just shared the spreadsheet.
uh, but they have a tax like guy that apparently I don't know how it works, but I get covered too because I'm family. Like I'm their son or something like that.
Or something.
Yeah, yeah. Well,
Allegedly. Allegedly.
I
The
know I've
son.
like talked to them, and I don't know if this is related to, but I know I've like talked to my parents and been like, they've told me they're like, yeah, normally they wouldn't like ever serve somebody like you because you don't make any money. But like you're related to us, so they'll just do it. So
Oh, what a dig.
I feel
yeah.
that.
So that's how I get my taxes done.
I'm curious, Morgan. Does he have you write down like the mileage that you drive for work every year, like an estimation of the mileage that you drive, and then you can write some of that off too?
Yeah, I do.
That's what I do.
Yeah, I calculate. So what I do is he'll send me an email and like probably in like February or something like that and say like, hey, I need all this information for you. I need to know if you've paid your quarterlies. I need to know what expenses you're going to write off this year. I need to know your mileage, how much you've driven. Obviously, he needs my W-2s and my 1040s. So I just make this big Google document of like I said, going through my bank account, finding every expense I've made, and then going through my Venmo, going through a few other like random things. Yeah, then in that document I include this is how much I've driven to and from work. And usually I just calculate that via like Google Maps. And then I go through the calendar and I find out what days were off either because of shows or whatever. But that's hard too, because if I do a show, I've got to calculate that differently. Like that's me driving to New Haven to do a show. I include that too. And I've got to keep it all on my calendar, I guess. So I just do it from there. So.
Gotcha. Cool.
Yeah, that's really cool. Thank you for sharing. Yeah, it's definitely something that not a lot of I feel like in the circle that I have been in, not a lot of musicians really know about that. And, we had a little bit of that in some of our college classes, depending on who you had for a couple particular classes, and who your mentor was. You would hope that they could give you information about that. But that's really difficult because, already we're at a disadvantage. And I say that with the most humility of us being able to pursue a career with uh, in the arts, which is such a privilege as it is, but we are at somewhat of a disadvantage of playing of being in a career in a field where we kind of have to beg for money a lot of the time, in one way or another. And if you're not taking the appropriate steps, sometimes it comes down to being able to pay certain bills over other bills, and that's not a fun position, and that's something that I think is pretty heavy. Cool. Well, we have another Instagram question. This comes from, I'm going to say his name right. I'm going to say it in my head first. This comes from an Instagram follower named Julio Cristaldo. Yeah, and he reached out from Instagram, and he wants to know what percentage of income. This is a serious question, guys. And then we have a really incredible question. I hope John is eating his dinner quickly, because we're going to need him for this last question. But Julio wants to know what percentage of income comes from where. So as different avenues of musicianship, you have teaching, you have gigs. That's not all, I guess, right? You could have another job here and there. Yeah. I'll start, right? Because I haven't answered too many of these questions. As of 3 years ago, I took a job teaching music at a public school. And I had been before that, I had been doing kind of like the typical classical studio musician thing where I was playing everywhere and anywhere for any bit of money. I was teaching 5 days a week. I was doing a combination of teaching out of a music store, music and arts, as well as driving to students' houses. And I was working at, when I was at grad school, I was working at Whole Foods. So I was doing a lot of stuff. I was working very hard. And then obviously, you know, trying to go to grad school and practice for several hours a day on top of that is insane. Um, but 3.5 years ago, I took this job teaching music, and I got my undergraduate degree in music education, and I got certified. Kept the cert, even though I didn't go into the field right away. And now all of my money, this year and last year, has come from teaching at that school. That doesn't mean that I haven't played a gig here and there and gotten some money, but I haven't reported it because it's only been, you know, I mean, really, I think last year I made $175 off of gigs because I'm not looking for that right now. And I definitely regret, not regret, I'm sorry, I definitely miss part of that life of, you know, sleeping in when I want to. Well, that's because I have a kid, but, you know, practicing in the morning, getting your work done, and then going and teaching from 3 to 9 and having a gig after. I definitely miss some of that. But my income comes from a public school job, and it has its pros and cons. I have benefits. I have a stable schedule, but in some ways, I have less control over the stability of my job. Arts programs are sometimes the first ones to get cut, and I don't have any say in that. Even if I have tenure, I can be moved to a different position, but I can't guarantee, you know, that hustle of going and getting gigs and getting students and, you know, landing that gig that pays you whatever you ask for, right? Those are things that I can't really shoot for right now. So I'm sort of at the mercy of this of a contracted teaching job. So that's my answer.
I'd say under normal circumstances, which these are not, um, teaching would make up like 80% roughly, 80 to 85% of my income personally, and then gigs would be about 20, maybe 20 to 20 or 20 to 15%. But because of COVID, it's been almost 100% from teaching. And I mean, gigs have been few and far between. I can only speak for myself, but you know, there aren't a lot of people who are hiring guitarists for cocktail parties or weddings or concerts, obviously, as the main one. But those are kind of out the door at this point. And maybe a little bit of day trading here and there too. But that's, you know, that's another thing.
How has your teaching changed, since this is a question I have for you guys who teach mostly guitar lessons and stuff like that? I know Morgan teaches other things too, but how has your teaching changed when it goes to the online setting, or just during COVID in general? How has that really affected the style of your lessons, if at all?
Well, you have to get really good at explaining everything because, as you know, the guitar is so physical and like very sensory. So you're actually missing that physical kinetic sensation when you are one-on-one with the student in person. Oftentimes I would just go up and adjust a student myself with my own hands. And now I'm instructing a parent to say, nope, move Jimmy's arm like this. Nope, the other way. No, the other left. Okay, no, like that. So I was an adjustment the first month, but I think it's honestly made me a better teacher and better at explaining everything. It's an advantage for the student too, because then they get to warm up. They don't have to drive and then, you know, get all cold. So no excuses anymore for, oh, my hands are cold. I'm just kidding. But yeah, as a teacher, I never expected to teach online, or maybe a few lessons for the people who weren't in Connecticut. But turns out I actually really love it. It's been a really great adjustment. But I do agree with Alex. That's the majority of my income at this point too. Couple weddings here and there, which were pretty disastrous, like just from the perspective of the COVID standards and having to like play outside in October and, you know, trying to be safe. And it's just been like, it's been intense. And I think all the musicians that I know have adjusted really well, but man, it does take a lot of energy to like make all those changes and do it quickly in order to survive and, you know, do your job. So I think for me, I work at like 4 different studios on top of my private studio. And the studios meaning like a combination of like local music store, music school, high school, you know, music program. So it's funny. So when the schools dropped off, I was like, uh-oh, there goes half my teaching right there when the kids, I just don't have classes. So what do you do? So I would just say, make sure that you diversify your portfolio, because you don't want to just do all performing or all teaching or all like lectures and competitions you can make money from. There's a lot of avenues to make money. So I would just say, the more that you can diversify yourself, the more successful you're going to be. And this like year totally proves that, that value.
Yeah. Isn't it so interesting and ironic almost that something that is such a personal and beautiful thing is so, am I going to get in trouble for saying undervalued in society? Like, is that appropriate? I mean, whatever Jackie is making, I want some of. What is that? What is it, a Christmas pie?
Oh, you're mute.
I know, I'm sorry. I'll show you a picture. It's like I'm in the middle of making it, but this is going to be the final result. It is a malted chocolate hazelnut pie.
Oh.
Okay, guys, I'll pick you guys up. Looks like we're going again.
2 hours away.
Get your masks, guys. We're going.
Next gig, I'll make us something. Yeah.
Oh
Cool.
my goodness.
Yeah.
Wow. I forgot what I
So,
said.
yeah,
I mean, is that too nihilistic? But I you know, I was talking to John and Morgan the other night on a very fun Bluetooth drive home, and you know, you make good money teaching, but you don't get a lot of work. You don't get the kind of work that makes you feel comfortable and makes you feel not worried about 20 people saying, oh, hey, we're going to be gone for 2 months. You know, and that, especially as a young person, I got hit by that so many times.
Well, I think it depends on the setting you're teaching it, right? Because like the studios I'm at, like I've been at music stores before and in the past where it felt like, yeah, like it was a lot rougher. Like people would just be like, oh, I'm going to be gone for the next month. Like I'm going on vacation or something like that over the summer. But I don't know. I think it depends where you teach, because like my current situation, I feel like the studio I teach at the most is like super duper organized with that sort of thing. And that just like never happens. And if it does happen, I almost always have like some other person after. So weirdly, I feel like really secure in my job situation right now. And if I had to answer the first part of your question, like what proportion of income or where is my income coming from? Basically the same page as what everybody else said, that this year is really bad for gigs. Maybe the only difference for me is that in years prior, like a decent amount more was coming from gigs when I did theater shows, just because there's the sad reality is that like when I don't know, when I played a bunch of theater shows, you'll just get emails like, hey, we need a guitar player, like come play this show, these are the dates, here's the pay. And there's always demand for electric guitar players. There's never really any emails like, hey, we need you to play classical guitar, like come do it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would say before I was like getting more income from gigs, but mainly from electric gigs. So
I auditioned for one classical guitar pit gig, and Dan Hardington beat me. But it was okay. It was
Was it
okay.
Man La Mancha?
Of course. What else would it be, Morgan? What else would it be?
Yeah, that's like his show.
That's fine. That's cool. That's cool. It wasn't at Playhouse on Park. It was somewhere else. It was up north.
Was it Cape Cod?
No,
Didn't they do Cape Cod? Okay.
No, it was in Connecticut.
In
And that's a really interesting thing, and I feel like maybe in the future you and I could talk about that. Is that while you're still being hired to play guitar, the function of a concert player or even a wedding player for classical guitar is very different than an electric guitarist in the pit. And there's something very I don't know if this is the appropriate word, but stable. Like, that when they do Shrek Jr., they're gonna need, or Shrek in general, like there's gonna be a guitarist in need. Like, you will need a guitarist to play that thing. Whereas that library doesn't have to, hire a guitar player. They could just have paint night. Like it doesn't need to be that. And so in some ways the circle of gigs that you are that pool is sort of especially in Connecticut, where you are, once you get into that scene, you're kind of like, you see the same people and over again.
Yeah,
it's a little more secure in that way.
Well, I feel like one of the other reasons I gravitated towards that too is just because I'm not really great with like I love playing, I love practicing. I don't really like the business side of things. And I feel like as a classical guitar player, you really have to like sell yourself to these venues to say, here's why you should hire me here. Whereas if you want to play theater shows, it's just like you wake up one morning and somebody has messaged you on Facebook, hey, we need a guitar player. Come play our gig. And I'm like, oh, that's easy. I like that.
Wow. So, I'm not getting those messages. Are you guys getting those messages?
Well, I haven't in like a year. So once shows come back, hopefully.
Morgan, what's your favorite show, FYI? Or BTW? I'm breaking in the old podcast muscles here. They're not they're not quite there yet. I'm not as swole as Morgan.
I don't know. Weirdly, I've got some weird connection to Pippin, the new Pippin. And when I played that show, I remember I really didn't like it that much. But now, like 2 years, like since I've played it, or maybe I guess it's only been a year. Maybe it's just because that was one of the last big shows I did before the pandemic. It's like, oh man, I hear like "Touch the Sky" from Pippin, and I'm like, oh, that song is so good. Yeah. So I don't know that, and some of the shows I've done a lot, I guess. Like, I don't know. Some people hate Mamma Mia. I can never get tired of like playing Dancing Queen, right? Like, how can you not enjoy that? Or even the Addams Family. I've played it so many times, but actually that show is pretty funny and it's got good music too. So
I commit to seeing more shows when this pandemic is over, because
you should come to my shows.
I will. I really will, because you can't appreciate something until it's taken away. And I think I mentioned to Sarah before, over this pandemic, I really, really have become obsessed with Phantom, and which has no guitar part except for the recorded guitar part in the track that they lip sync. The title track, they actually lip sync on stage. All productions do it, because they're going down like all of these stairs and going in a boat and flying around. But so that sort of got me into more musicals. Guys, I think the time has come for us to ask our final question. Morgan knows what it is, because I
know it is. I don't know if I have the energy.
Before we go there, I need to tell, first of all, I want to thank all of our question people. And if you, which is two people, Julio and Mike, thank you for submitting your questions. I also want to thank you if you are a viewer and you've watched this far and you're not my mom or dad. First of all, thank you, mom and dad. I really appreciate it. But
Thanks,
also,
Mom. She'll be watching too.
Yeah, thank you, Mrs. Pisoni. Was that? Yeah. And all the family members. If you're not one of the immediate family members, thank you for watching this far. We're just having fun. I thought this would be a good way to kick off the second season of this. Thank you for your support, everybody, and telling me to come back and do this. I went through a little funk in the pandemic, but so does everybody, and I'm glad that I made it out the other side. So this question was presented to us. Sarah, do you know what I'm going to ask?
Of course. Of course.
Okay, Sarah asked this question I want to set the stage, okay? I'm in my kitchen. My son is sleeping in his crib. It's a calm night. There's very little cleaning to be done. My wife and I are getting along. And Sarah asks the group a question, and that question then started off as a discussion and then turned into a very violent, aggressive, hate-filled debate akin to an episode of some sort of Fox News, just violence. Sarah, would you ask the question for the podcast, please?
Sure. All right, guys. Real question. Who do you think would win in a fight? An Alaskan grizzly bear or a gorilla? That's the question.
That's the question. It's a good question. But
so
it's
Ben, I can't keep this PG-13 if we're going to talk about this, man.
Do we just put a parental advisory at this point in the
Here's the
conversation?
A gorilla is a psychopath. A gorilla is a psychopath. Right, Morgan? Where's Morgan?
I'm back. It disconnected. I know the question, though. I didn't get to hear it, but I know what we're talking about.
Okay, Morgan, a gorilla is a psychopath, right?
Okay, because Alex is okay. I'm gonna throw shade on the. Okay, Alex, you're the argument of like, I brought up gorillas are like, okay, we have to keep this PG. I brought up the not great things gorillas do to other gorillas.
What do they do to other gorillas? But keep it.
I can't say it.
Just don't swear. Just don't swear it. Don't swear. They
like friggin' murder each other, and they like murder baby gorillas and stuff like that. Yeah. But it's different. You and Brian tried to compare it and say like, oh, bears do the same thing. But it's like bears are like isolated. You know what I mean? They're like,
lions do the same thing too. Lions are pack animals. They do the same thing.
But we're not. Hey, that's a strong man. We're not talking about lions.
But it doesn't make your animal special. It doesn't make your animal special, Morgan.
No, but it makes. I'm not saying it makes it special, but it makes it better than a bear.
Morgan, but here's the thing, though. You have to think about it though. Like, if a gorilla is fighting a bear, it's a survival question. So it doesn't matter like a criminal record of who just in general tends to be more protective of their children, who in general has some weird habits. Like it's literally a survival thing. So if you look at two things fighting against each other, height, weight, claws, like the bigger animal, Alaskan grizzly bear has way more advantage than the gorilla.
Okay. Yeah, this is like not about like the traits. It's about like a pay-per-view battle special Saturday night, 8 p.m. You pay for them to duke it out. That's what we're talking about.
Yeah, Morgan, can you mock up a pay-per-view with your Photoshop skills? Can you mock up?
I will.
But so it's not about. So I get what we're saying. It's about just the pure combat skills. But Alex, you're talking about jujitsu, which is historically a martial art that says the better that you are at this, the more you can disregard strength and weight. So couldn't it be possible? I don't think gorillas do jujitsu, but couldn't it be possible that a gorilla just has more effective combative skills because they're crazy?
Yeah, you're like humanizing animals right there. Like in the animal kingdom, like 90% of the time, size is the difference maker here, and we're talking about an animal that weighs 3 times as much.
Yeah, but that's
You know?
not always true. Because if you look at, all right, let me give you a good
With
example.
land animals, with mammals especially, it's very true.
Hang on. Okay, you get two dogs, right? Dogs are animals. Can't argue they're not animals, right?
Dogs are not animals, actually. Dogs are science experiments.
Dogs are animals.
No, they're not.
What are you arguing right?
They're not.
Wait,
They're not.
what?
What is your argument?
Dogs are science experiments. Dogs have been genetically, like, selectively bred over thousands of years to look the way that they do. They all descend from wolves. They're not the same as wild animals at all. At all.
Okay,
You're
I
so
have to
right,
agree.
Alex. It's just
Alex
such a
is-
radical comment. It's like, ooh, edgy. But yes, you're right. It's just if you look at the skeleton of a modern bulldog, I mean, that's proof enough. It's like monstrous.
It is, actually. It's kind of sad. So anyway, go on with your like horribly hateful argument, Morgan.
Hateful. Well, I was gonna say, can we have you say on air for the world to hear that dogs are not animals? Confirmed, dogs are not animals.
Dogs are not wild animals.
Hold on, can you say that? Oh, hold on, I have someone here who you need to say this to. Excuse me.
Hey, Maple.
Please say this to my dog.
Hey, Maple, you're not a wild animal. You're a domesticated animal.
Oh, look how cute she is.
She looks so sad, Alex. I mean, she is very domesticated. I will give you that. She snuggles very hard. She wants to come snuggle right now.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Exactly.
Okay.
See, no animals in nature want to do that. That's why she's a domesticated, nice animal, not a wild animal.
Well, she's the cutest little science experiment ever.
She is.
Yeah, but I still feel like that doesn't work because like temperaments are a thing in animals, right? Like if you take, for example, geese, which are not a threat to really anybody. They're very aggressive because they're large birds. But if you fucking like go at a goose that's charging you,
that's an F-bomb. Can I say F-bombs now? Can I say them?
Oh yeah.
Ding 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 ding.
But you know what
I
mean?
First one, everybody.
Go ahead, Alex. You get one.
You're gonna have to bleep it.
No,
Alex,
no.
You get one. Make it good.
I'm not gonna do it.
PG-13, you get 2 right nowadays.
Is
to
that
keep
how it
it that before 2 or 3.
Well, I used to, so you get the third one, Alex, if you choose to use it.
I'm good.
I think the only way to settle this, and I appreciate how we haven't brought each other's pasts and mistakes into this. I am scared of Alex right now. I'll tell you that. I think the only way to really go about this is to just skim through a YouTube video. I think that's the only way to do it. Right here we have grizzly bear versus western gorilla from Wild Ciencias. And we're not gonna watch the whole 10 minutes.
Are they gonna actually fight?
No.
It's legal?
I watched this the other night. It ends with the bear winning though, so.
I absolutely Googled this too after our argument.
Okay, but what about
debate?
Okay, well, since that doesn't go with my understanding and my reasoning, let's see what Joe.
Hello, freak bitches. I don't know, but I feel like remember when you told me that story about the monkey that you had when you were on Fear Factor?
Oh yeah, the monkey beat my ass.
That when you held that little thing, you thought this thing's made of wood. That's what I feel when I get you up on my shoulder. I'm like, damn, this thing's made of wood. I don't want to know.
Oh my god.
Okay, hold on a second. Wait.
But don't you think a chimp is faster?
Get that chump off there.
Don't you think a chimp is faster than a gorilla?
Give me a silverback.
Okay.
Have you seen a silverback come out of the freaking jungle?
Fast.
That answered a lot.
The video said I was right, I think, is what
I talked about chimpanzees. It's not even gorillas. Like,
yeah.
That's literally irrelevant.
And why does straight line speed matter at all in a fight?
Yeah.
How do you know? What if they have to race before they have to fight? What if they have to do a
the question is a fight.
Like,
that's the thing, Morgan. You have to think about it in context effect. We can't just talk about their history and their differences.
They do a 400-meter dash.
Sarah, if you were so convinced about your answer, then why did you ask it?
Oh, he got you.
Well, okay, here, I mean, everyone, listen, you can have your own opinion. Also, by the way, I wasn't the one who started the question. It was my friend who we have over like 200 something answers apparently at this point, which is really funny. My friend asked, like they're my closest friends from college, so he asked our group chat, and then like all of us just started asking like our family and our friends throughout the day. It just ends up being like this random passing question. Like I'll see my brother and I was like, hey, you know, like who do you think would win this fight? And it just like kept going one after the other. And now I'm asking you guys. And I mean, you have your own opinion. And at first I actually was thinking about, my initial answer was gorilla, but then when I looked at like height, weight, and thought about it more, I was like, no, actually, I think the bear would win. And I mean, believe what you want, but for me, I don't care what the answer is, but I just think context is important and like for an argument. So that's just my two cents.
Let me just make one last point before we end this with gorillas being the winner. If you want Grizzly Bear to be the winner, you start your own podcast and get your own 170 followers.
The lone Grizz.
The lone Grizz. You know that.
All right, Ben, you're on.
Okay, this is a little uneducated. I'm not too clear. I feel like Alex will know this for a fact, but isn't there some truth to some animals just like being, you can kind of like bitch them out a little bit, like you can intimidate them? And isn't that a thing about like brown bears, right? Isn't that a thing with brown
Black
bears?
Black bears.
But isn't there like a bear where like an adult male can just be like, and the bear's like, oh, my bad.
Or female. I've done it. Excuse me, sir.
Have you?
I have scared off a black bear. Well, not just with my like feminine voice, because let's be real. Like I was like, hey, get away. And then he was like, no.
I was thinking,
I had to like take a trash can and then like bang it, and then he went away. But yeah, the black bears, Alex is totally right about that. Sorry to interrupt, but
no, I'm sorry to be a sexist pig.
No.
So isn't there a chance, Alex, that since they're both bears, that the black bear and the grizzly bear are the same thing?
What?
And the grizzly bear would just be like,
no, a grizzly bear eats like a black bear for breakfast. But if you're talking about polar bear versus grizzly bear, that's another conversation. Because polar bears are really scary.
Yeah.
And we might need to start like a guitar squad, like Friday Fact. It could just be like Friday Face Off instead, and then we can just pose different animals and we can just see the answers, like the series like Megalodon versus Mega Shark. We'll do that, except for with real animals, and we'll just pose questions and then get to the heart of it, get to the facts.
I know what Alex is gonna say.
Yeah, well, so and then for every single one of those, me and Morgan can dress up in the respective animal outfits and just beat the hell out of each other.
Yes,
that
please.
sounds like
oh my
fun.
God,
I'm down.
I'm so game for that. I have like so much pent up rage from the past year. I need to take it out.
Yeah.
This is a healthy place to end.
Nice.
This is a nice healthy place to end.
Okay.
Before it gets too violent. Okay.
I want to thank everybody for watching. I also want to thank my guests. Below the video, you're going to see some wonderful links from these people. We talked about some really important things today. We also talked about some crazy shit. So I'm gonna make sure that you see their links below. These are all brilliant musicians in their own right. None of that should be undercut just because some of them think that a bear could beat a crazy ass gorilla. So thank you all for being here, and I miss you all.
We miss you too.
Miss you too, Ben. And for anyone who's interested about how the pie will come out, I'll be sure to take a picture, and then you can post it if need be.
I'll put it in the story.
If anybody needs to know, because I've got a good feeling about it, guys. I do.
All right.
Bye, everybody.
Bye. You're wrong, Morgan.
All right, see ya.
Bye.